Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Gorton, and welcome to my show, Willows Bend. Tonight, we are on episode number 127, and we're going to be talking about medieval birth control methods tonight. So, before we begin, everybody please play nicely. No trolls allowed to pop in on the feed, yada, yada. I am also simultaneously broadcasting into my Willows Bend group on Facebook. Hi, everybody. Sandy is asking what's the name of that song. It's like, I'd have to look it up for you. It was on YouTube, and it was kind of a piano concerto number 6 or something like that. It didn't have like a standard name, but I just listened to all of them until I found something that seemed like it kind of fit with, the show. So at work, I was hoping for like an Enya song or something to use, but I couldn't find just the right one that I wanted or that I liked best that they had that wasn't some weird copyright infringement thing. So this is what I got instead. Anyhow, yeah. Prelude number 6. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I knew it was number 6 something. Yeah, I thought it kind of fit the group, Sandy. It just, because we cover such a wide plethora of topics, it seemed like it worked. So if anyone watching live elsewhere on YouTube, online at somafusion.com, anywhere else, if you see me looking down to the side, I have my phone. Whoops, I just shut off my feed. That's nice, Donna. I picked up the wrong. There we go. My phone is up and running, and I use that to monitor the chat in my group on Facebook. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing, is watching my comments and interacting with my group. So before we get started, everybody in my group, for those who might be new to me, likes me to do a circle of protection for everybody. Keep out any negativity. Hey, Chris. I forgot to call you before the show. I'm glad you made it. Sorry, it's been one of those days, honey. Keep out any negativity and ill will, etc., etc. So let me do that real quick. Burn up the stage here. Get her going. Come on, match. Don't go out on me just yet. Shouldn't take 5 matches to get this going. It's pretty dry. I was trying to use up the bottom loose leaf stuff from my stage I keep in the plastic bag to store, and I was trying to use up all that had fallen and broken off, so hence it's in pieces. Almost, not quite. It's getting there. It's got a little bit of smoke rising. And I also am not sure why. We were trying to figure it out, why there looks like there's like a yellowish lighting in my room. The same lights are on as always. I don't know. Katie and I couldn't figure it out as to what's going on. It's getting mostly dark out right now here in upstate New York in the United States, in case anyone is out of the country listening. It's mostly dark here. The days are getting longer, which I appreciate immensely. So there we go. All right. So at this stage, I cast a circle of protection around all who are entering in my group or in my show or listening in and tuning in elsewhere. May the circle of protection prevent any injurious behavior from harm, ill will, or otherwise, and may it be reflected back to the one who is bringing it on. And may that protection follow each individual out of the show into their personal and private lives, as well as anybody who subsequently watches the show after it airs live during a replay. May that also keep them safe from any harm or ill will. So I will it, so mote it be. And a couple stones out tonight, so that should be good. Alrighty, glasses on so I can read chat. Hey, Miss Tanya, how are you, beautiful? Okay, so for those who are new to me, I my show is topic driven, meaning that my audience members are the ones who pick what show I'm going to cover the following week. We vote on it at the end of each show. And last week we chose the medieval birth control methods. So this is going to get interesting. You are very, very welcome, Sandy. And so we're going to start out by jumping over into Europe. And yes, also please like and share if possible. We appreciate that. So starting in Europe, now the Roman Catholic Church was really, really big on this topic and had a very clear stance on what they took to allow or not allow. They were very much, sorry, I thought I had something on my face, very firm on the biblical view as mentioned in Genesis regarding, go forth, be fruitful and multiply idea, and anything impeding that was seen to be outright sin and against church with morality and so forth. Now, the outside of the church view on things greatly varied on that, and for a lot of times throughout history, there existed like a duality between people who would publicly say, oh, yes, no, birth control is bad and abortions are bad and, against God and so forth. And then they would go on later hidden with further into their writing of whatever they were putting out, then be saying something in promotion of it or giving people a different way to offering them a different type of birth control method to use. Or recommending different things to be used, which are going to cover all the different kinds of birth control that were quite popular in the medieval period. So many clerics often reference the biblical story of Onan, who was the son of Jonah, the whole eaten by a whale story in the Bible. Onan supposedly used the withdraw method as a form of birth control and, quote, spilled his seed on the ground rather than impregnate his brother's wife. Now, how this was known, I'm not sure. Who was there to watch that one happen? And it was recorded for all of history and time to be seen. I'm not sure on that. Hi, Dad. As well as what was he doing sleeping with his dead brother's wife? Just saying. My own little 2 cents worth on that. So now this went on to become known as onanism, and it is the withdrawal method, what we call today as pulling out withdrawal method. It is the same thing. It's just viewed biblically. I can't say it biblically. There we go, Donna. From the religious standpoint, even with that, is not really okay within the Roman Catholic Church, because you are meant to have sex solely for the purpose of reproducing and populating the earth or overpopulating the earth. And so that's the whole premise of everything. So anything interrupting that is not okay with it, as far as the Catholic Church stood. Hey, Dad, how you doing? So according to prevention.com, it can be 96 to 97% effective as a means of birth control if, big, huge underline if it is used and done correctly. Now, that being said, what the if part is, if it's not performed correctly, or if the pre-ejaculate fluid contains sperm, then the withdrawal method is unreliable at best, and it also does nothing to stop the spread of STDs. So a guy has to have utmost control of his own body and manage to pull out prior to orgasm. And even then, again, if the pre-ejaculate fluid contains sperm at all, done deal and a moot point at that point. So, it's not reliable in that way whatsoever. And very few men can manage that level of control consistently where it's not going to sneak up on them and whoops, there it is. Now, abortions were it's never been endorsed by the church, and performing one was often a crime, of course, connected with witchcraft, witchcraft got blamed for everything, especially back in the day. And as contact with the Islamic kingdoms spread, so did the withdrawal method, as long as the woman had knowledge and gave her consent prior to the act of having intercourse. As long as she knew about it, that was going to be what happened and gave her permission for it to happen, then the withdrawal method was fine to use. And it became kind of the most readily, well, it was the readily available and most popular method. However, again, not super effective, because timing it just right isn't much of a thing. In addition to, you can still get, it takes one little swimmer to get through, and then done deal, it's over with. So, and then it kind of becomes a moot point with preventing pregnancy. Now, there were different herbal methods that got used back in the medieval period. Now, in many medical texts of the time, there were lists of mixtures designed to, quote, hurry the menses, which is the technical name for a woman's menstrual period, or cleansing the womb. And they were usable to end pregnancy, but several herbs had gotten included, and you had to get the mixtures just right, of course, or else it could either be harmful or ineffective to stop pregnancy and or cause an early term abortion. So some of the herbs that can be used is arum, earthwort, lupine, Queen Anne's lace, myrrh, pennyroyal, peony, cypress, parsley, rue, licorice, pepper, century plant, and Artemisa. There we go. Sorry. How efficient they were depended on the amounts, again, that were used and included. Like pepper really has little to no effect on a pregnant woman, but back in the day, it was thought to actually be able to hold things. So, yeah, Erin, all you ever have to do is be in the group when we're starting, and it will pop up and start. So you don't have to have a separate link for it. You can just come into the Willows Bend group and wait for it to begin. And then it pops up when it's time. So, yeah. Now, other herbs like pennyroyal, parsley, and Queen Anne's lace are so effective that modern women also are recommended to avoid them now, because again, they can be dangerous if they're not, you don't get the amounts just right. But one needs knowledge. It just kicked me out of my group. Hang on, guys. Sorry about that. I don't know what was up with that. Okay, where are we? There we are. Okay, there we go. One does have to have knowledge of the concentration needed of the herbs in order to induce a miscarriage, and could be dangerous for the woman taking them. So there could be side effects, especially by today's standards. And, you know, many women today would be kind of like, I don't know, I'm not taking that. But some of them are actually regaining popularity in modern times. Now, there is one court case that recorded from the 15th century. So for those who aren't aware of how that's counted, that would have been in the 1400s. There was a woman who died from an infestation of herbs for inducing miscarriage. So basically, she ingested a bunch of herbs. They happened to be the wrong amounts, and it killed her. And, you know, rather than just causing her to lose the baby. So the person was basically sought after for a criminal trial. So physical methods used could also include herbs, as well as physical barriers for contraception. Now, today, when we think about physical barriers for contraception, God, I can't talk tonight. Sorry, guys. One, could often think of the use of the sponge. And, the sponge is literally a sponge that has a little handle hanging down off of it that is covered in a spermicide material that on contact will kill the sperm, but it's put up against on the inside of a woman's vagina against her cervix, has a little loop so you can pull it back out when you're done with it. So a lot of herbs could be used like that too. I don't know what. Oh, that's the @ sign, Natalie. I don't know why there's an @ sign at the end, but yeah. Aaron says, I've always been interested how they felt with pregnancy back then without modern medicine or hospitals around. Well, a lot of it was done through folk medicine, but regular medicine was in its early days back then and was being studied. So this wasn't all just backwoods medicine done. And, what many people considered witches were actually healers, and they had a very in-depth knowledge of the use of herbs and so forth, and they were typically like the equivalent of country doctors, but what we consider medicine was in its early days. Oh, okay, Natalie, sorry. So she doesn't know what that sign is, but okay. So herbs could also be used for physical barriers and contraception. So in the canon of medicine, Avicenna, which was completed in the year 1025 of the current era, it recommends using mint inserted against the cervix prior to intercourse. Then you could be minty fresh, I guess, too. The author Avicenna also recommends the use of cedar oil as an early spermicide, as it corrupts the sperm, quote unquote, and prohibits impregnation. Hey, Annette, how are you, love? Also recommended was the use of plants that were pulped up. In other words, you would have like a mortar and pestle and grind them all up until it's squishy pulp, and the juice from inside the plant would add to the mixture, so it would mix up into like a moist mixture. You're funny, Natalie. And so also recommended the use of plants pulped up, as well as using the dung of various animals as pessaries, which are also known as physical barriers. Yes, dung of certain animals would be used to be put up against the cervix inside of a woman's body to use as a physical barrier. Now, it doesn't mention anything in any of the research about the rates of infection that would come about from these methods. Gotta wonder on that one, but there were also magical physical methods that got used. So also mentioned in a few main categories. Oh, absolutely, Tanya, like just gross. After also in a few main categories got mentioned involving using parts of sterilized plants and animals in an attempt to absorb the seminal fluid. Some, quote, sympathetic magic, which is a type of imitative magic based on correspondence. Among other things, Aaron, yeah. He says that, yeah, when that caused a yeast infection, yeah, among other things. And so the sympathetic magic, what called for using small bits of mule, yes, mule, to be worn on the body during sex, and may have even been eaten beforehand. Bits of mule. Over time, this practice kind of waned until a piece of mule skin hung over the bed was considered to be sufficient. Also used was willow bark tea to kill the libido. I think the common thought behind that is willow bark tea in herbal medicine is used to reduce fever and pain. So I think it was thought that, well, if it can bring down a fever, then it would reduce your urge to even bother having sex. Hey, Stacy. White poplar was also used, combined with the, you ready for this one? Testicle of a mule in a mixture mentioned in a 13th century medical text, which would have been written in the 12th century. brings a new meaning to the term mule-headed, right? And I often, in doing that research about the mule thing, I am wondering if part of the thinking with that, now it didn't mention it in the research, but to me it seems kind of a Captain Obvious reasoning perhaps, is because mules are sterile. So mules are a mating between horses and an ass, and there are chromosomal defects that occur like a birth defect now in a human, and you might see a reduction in intelligence or physical defects. However, in a mule is the result of that mating, and they are born sterile, so they can't reproduce. So I think that might have been the thinking back then, is that, well, mules are sterile, so hey, if we use part of it, then it could make us be at least temporarily sterile as well. Just a thought anyway on my part. But now German women were a set of beings all unto their own. They used other magical methods, including sitting or lying on a certain number of fingers to correspond to the number of years they wished to be sterile for. Also used was, wait for it, spitting into the mouth of a frog 3 times was supposed to prevent pregnancy. Also, going to the grave of a sister, if they had one, and calling out 3 times that she has no children. Less frequently used methods by German women also included, now this is pretty bad, so forewarning on this one, cutting off the paw of a living female weasel while it was still alive, or the finger or arms of a dead fetus. Can you imagine? I mean, like, I don't even know where some of these things would get thought of as methods, but this is what it said, that in some German culture areas of Europe, that this is what some women, German women, would do to help prevent pregnancy. Other options, that was my thought too, is I immediately thought of you, Natalie, and I was like, oh God, she's gonna cringe when I say that. Yeah, very, very much so. Hey, Gina. I would wonder too, Danya. So other options, if all else failed, hey, you guys picked this topic. That's all I can say, is remember that. You guys chose the topic. If all else failed, they would have the child. Infanticide, which is the killing of a baby, was rare, but some would choose abandonment in hopes that they would get adopted by another family. Notably, along with a large gift, you could give your child over to the church, but you left the child with no choice but to take their vows, either to become a priest or a nun, depending on the gender, and parents couldn't reclaim them at a later time. Whereas if you gave it to a family member or friend's family to raise, they legally could go back and reclaim the child as theirs down the road or something. However, if they were given to the church, then it was a done deal and there was no reclaiming. Hey, Stace, you did ask for it, and that's all I could say. You guys voted it into a topic. I'm not even sure who suggested it originally. Might have even been Karen. This is kind of like something she might come up with. Careful, don't trip. Round and round we go. Round and round we go. Careful, don't fall. Okay, here he goes. Now, of note with spermicides, the first official record of contraception, there was an Egyptian record of a recipe for a spermicide from about the year 1525 BCE. Did she, Erin? Yeah, it seems like something Karen might suggest or come up with, and she's not even here. Go figure. She could still be working. I don't know. Or she forgot we were on, one of the two. Um, Normally, though, she's finishing up work when we start the show. So the first official record of contraception, there was an Egyptian record of a recipe for a spermicide from about 1525 BCE, which is the new categorical way of, rather than AD or BC, it's now AD, sorry, BCE or CE for before current era or the current era. So this was the year 1525 before the year 0. And this was to mix grated acacia leaves with honey soaked with a gauze bandage, and in it to then insert vaginally. And interestingly, acacia does have lactic acid in its sap, where it is proven to be effective as a spermicide, interestingly. So they were, kind of advanced in their thinking back then. Further plant-based contraceptions. Now, most indigenous people around the world, all the way to the Middle Ages, which is the same as the medieval period. It ran from 5th century current era or through to the 15th century. So from the year 400 and something up through the 14th century or 1400s, sorry, 15th century or the 1400s. Some plant-based contraceptives are regaining the attention among scientists as well as historians as to kind of taking a look at their efficacy rate. Like, is it something that is able to actually still work in today's world for some people? Not soon enough. Yeah, right. Much knowledge has been lost over time regarding plant-based contraceptives, and often because of this, history has been contested. But archaeologically, there is evidence and some written records showing evidence of these, quote, drugs being a reliable contraception or to induce early term abortion. Much was lost due to the church's stance on it and the elevation of midwives to being professionals versus, backwood country women helper type of people. Midwives were elevated to be professional people, and to what at that point things started changing a bit. So, for example, archaeological texts show silphium, aka laser wort, grew in the hills near the Greek city-state of Cyrene, Libya, in North Africa. Greek writer Pliny stated that it could be used to promote menstrual, the menstrual diagnosis. So meaning that herb could cause a early term abortion or to cause a woman to start having her period, and hence getting rid of any possible pregnancy in its early terms. And I'm not here at all to take a stance on abortion or argue it as a method of birth control or otherwise, just presenting the facts as the records know it. So just throwing that out there to prevent anybody getting hot-headed regarding the topic. Everybody has their own views and religious beliefs, and I just ask everyone to stay respectful on it and let's not turn it into a battle. Just about to say that these type of people have been out in the woods too long, LOL. Well, many were, there wasn't anywhere near the population of people in the world back then as there are now, and by any means. And people were more rural farmers, and they were just starting to kind of come into their own with having more rural settlements rather than being transient and on the go and on the move, following herds of animals for survival and being hunter-gatherers. They were now having, full year-round settlements developing during that time. And so people were staying in one place longer. And a lot of the women who were previously considered midwives, that knowledge got passed down and taught generation to generation, and they became kind of the healer or the women's healer, and were present during childbirth and so forth. So, and not at all to be sexist, but women have a whole lot more go wrong with our bodies overall than men tend to. So, more on physical contraceptive barriers. Ancient philosopher Aristotle even wrote in the History of Animals 7, Part 3, back in 350 BCE, before current era, that to avoid conception, women must prevent the, quote, womb from coming in contact with male sperm by rubbing it with cedar oil, lead ointment, or incense. Mixed with olive oil. Yes, the lead ointment was highly toxic and could cause death. And how one would necessarily be able to rub it on a woman's cervix, which is, top of the vagina before the uterus, in the grand scheme of a woman's genitalia and so forth, and internal organs, or reproductive organs, I should say. It's up there a little ways. And so unless I think you were a midwife doing it, I don't know if an average couple of people could figure out doing it themselves or how it would be done, but it's what it said. So around 300 CE saw the introduction of the contraceptive sponge to absorb semen. There's an Indian prevention method that survived time from the 8th century current era. So we're talking year 700 and something. So the cervical opening was brushed with a mixture. Now, and I'm not talking about American indigenous people, Indians. I'm talking about like traditional Indians. So one would brush the opening of the cervix with honey and ghee, which is a class of clarified butter. It's then rubbed or mixed with oil rock salt, which I'm not sure how one gets oil rock salt, and it was used to block semen. Maybe with an old-fashioned Q-tip, I don't know. It just seems like you would need a second person to be able to apply it adequately. I don't know. There was no mention in the research how this stuff would be done. Now, interestingly, honey does slow down the mobility of sperm, and rock salt is now considered to be a known spermicide. So, despite it being so long ago in our past, these things did pan out to be true. And I could see honey slowing up the rate in which sperm could swim through. And the ghee being a class of clarified butter, your body would keep it warm, and but it still would be kind of oily, so maybe have a hard time getting through. I don't know, but and how one would make oil rock salt, I don't know, but that's what it said. And that rock salt is now considered a known spermicide. So interesting. Now, behaviors. The more common used method and easiest to hide from the church is officially known as coitus interruptus. Anyone know what this is? I'll give people in my chat a minute, see if they know it. Great grandma always put saltpeter in the salt shaker, all the boys. That would be an effective aphrodisiac. Yeah, that's why I'm not sure if you would soak the rock salt in oil or not, but. So anybody in my chat know what coitus interruptus is? Take a guess. Sort of. Sandy's pretty close. Yep. Natalie's got it. Stopping sex, pulling out. Yep. And that goes back to the onanism that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, the withdrawal method, or it could also be included in that was masturbation, interestingly. Now, biblically, it's distinguished from masturbating. Both like self-gratification is also considered a sin, but withdrawing is kind of like a loophole that they would use to hide it from the church. Now, it was very commonly used as a method of birth control, unreliable, but common, a way to kind of hide that a woman was, hey, she's having sex, but she's just not ever turning up pregnant. Or rarely, in comparison to using no method of birth control. And there was no trace of anything left behind to demonstrate that anything was being done. Pulling a train out of the station, exactly, Annette. Tie the legs together. Hold that quarter between the knees. Yeah. Yeah, the coitus interruptus is the technical name for pulling out. Now, interestingly, U.S. Senator John Noonan has written extensively on the topic of onanism. He found the first dated reference to it appeared in the 9th century. In the beginning, it was linked to prostitution and love affairs within the Middle Ages anyway. Exactly, keep the quarter between the knees. From there, it became more widespread and began entering more conventional sexual relationships, including marriage, but has been shown to have a 22% failure rate amongst all users. So again, pulling out is not an effective means of birth control. It's not guaranteed to work. It depends on the control of the guide performing it and the timing. And again, if there's any sperm in the preseminal fluid, then it doesn't matter if you pull out or not. You could still get a woman pregnant. So, medieval demographic statistics from the early 15th century began showing married couples began limiting the number of offspring with methods including this method due to economic hardship. This was in direct conflict with the church's moralist denunciation of any contraceptive usage. Exactly, don't drop the nickel. And my mother always said, keep the quarter between your knees and you don't got to worry about it. The Catholic Church's view on contraception and procreation and all of that is, again, it sees procreation as essential for a marriage. Entering into an intentional childless marriage nullifies the sacrament of marriage. In other words, if you knowingly enter into marriage without any plans of having kids, then it's going to make the marriage null and void and not a valid marriage, because to be married means to make a family, apparently. So Pope Gregory, the 9th, in his letters declaring church law, dating from between 1227 to 1234 current era, declared that people intending to avoid having children were null. Abortions in the Middle Ages, medieval ages. Now, again, this is not my own personal opinion on the topic. This is strictly the research and what took place back then on it. Is it true that the sponge was the first version of the diaphragm? The sponge and the diaphragm are different, Erin, in that the diaphragm is a much kind of flatter, lightweight plastic / rubbery material that goes up against the cervix, almost like a inverted cup, whereas the sponge was soaked in spermicide so that as sperm would encounter it, it would kill it before it got a chance to enter into the uterus and hence cause pregnancy. So there's both our current methods still used for birth control. One can buy both of them in, over the counter at this point in drugstores. And some women have a preference for using either the sponge or a diaphragm. Yep. If you remember, so if you remember how soda bottles used to have that kind of rubbery plastic lining on the inside of them when you'd open it that you could pull out, and sometimes contest points would be on there and stuff. It's similar material to that would be used for a diaphragm. And, it would, because it's bendable and movable to fit the shape of the woman's body inside and go up against a cover. So if this is the opening of the cervix, then the diaphragm would be cup shaping, lining it so nothing could get through it and it would kind of bounce off. So whereas a sponge, again, would be soaked in spermicide and kill the sperm on contact. So abortions in the Middle Ages or medieval ages. So even back in the medieval times, abortion was just as contentious then as it is now. Even now, more than 600 years after the Middle Ages ended, the church still plays a pivotal role in how they're viewed. You know, everybody does have an opinion on them, on whether it's a sin or not, and so forth. And then they played a role, the church played a role in the moralistic and ethical views about abortion that people take publicly and privately. Now, that said, the medieval period is unique because due to the church's reach, many in medicine had to openly oppose abortion and condemning its use, and then in further texts, then give directions on using it as a form of birth control. So medieval Christianity took its cues from the Old Testament in Genesis, where again it instructed Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. So there was no terminating a pregnancy that was made okay in the Bible. And often even the use of contraceptions to prevent pregnancy was equally condemned as an abortion was. Now in 9th century text, so it's written back in the year 800s, a woman, quote, a woman who has taken a magic potion, however many times she would have otherwise become pregnant and given birth, must recognize herself guilty of homicide, end quote. By the 11th century, the views lightened mildly towards abortion. Decretum by Burchard of Worms. Yes, that was his title, Burchard of Worms. Now, a decretum was kind of a stating of where one stood on an important topic. States that, quote, it makes a big difference if a poor woman does it on account of the difficulty of feeding, or whether a fornicator, someone who commits adultery or otherwise is joined in marriage. So say if you are a prostitute or if you are having an affair on your spouse, if one chooses to have an abortion because of that, then it says so. States that it makes a big difference if a poor woman does it on account of the difficulty of feeding, or whether a fornicator does it to conceal her crime. Hey, Marianne. So in other words, you know, if a poor woman has an abortion because she can't feed her family and, you know, she happens to get pregnant, that was seen in a different light than a married woman having an affair or someone who is a sex worker and is using it to, quote, conceal her crime. So note that all blame here is put on the woman for pregnancy and birth control methods, even back then, as well as, you know, having an abortion, the decision to do so. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't always solely just the woman's decision to do so. If a man was messing around with his wife, well, he could push his mistress to do so and, you know, not have any trouble come his way from being married. There was a commonly used phrase back then, widespread back in the Middle Ages, si non caste tamen caught, which translates literally as, quote, if not chastely, then at least cautiously, or with care or precautions. It's kind of like our own, like if you can't be, the modern phrase, if you can't be good, be careful, is kind of what that equals. Early usage dates back to about 1049 and was commonplace by the 13th century. Interestingly, contraception was permissible in medieval Islam. Come on. You're not staying, because if you get your cause caught on this fabric, you're going to rip a big snag in it. Come on, move along, madam, go over there. I know, go on, thank you. So it was permissible in medieval Islam. The withdrawal method, hi Renee, was widely accepted and left in God's hands, but acceptable because of quote, the fear of incurring great financial hardship on account of the size of one's family, end quote. Can you please stay down? You know what? I can pet you just as easily beside me rather than on top of me. And even in medieval times, it was debated amongst thinkers when a fetus constituted a living being as far as abortion practices went. When was it okay to have an abortion or not? Like when did they first become a person? That even back then was widely debated. Now, some thought that after the fetus had formed extremities, then they would be considered a person. Others still thought, based on what I'm not sure, that around 40 days after conception, a baby would then get a soul at that point. And Islam, a fetus might not be considered a person until 120 days after conception, which would be about 4 months pregnant. And interestingly, too, at least that's when modern medicine can pick up on a heartbeat, typically at thereabouts. With a pregnant woman, you can typically start to hear the heartbeat around then. The idea that it was considering a child after or at conception didn't gain the momentum until medieval thought. So in other words, the idea that, it's as soon as you conceive, that as soon as an egg and sperm make contact and conception happens, that right then at that point that it becomes a person, that started gaining in popularity in thinking during the medieval times at that point. So now, interestingly, as far as becoming much more commonplace to think that at the second of conception, it was now a person, that really started getting popular around the 16th century with the Protestant reform of the church. But if caught, none of these were permissible, and the punishment imposed could be exile or some lesser form of penance from the church. Come on, baby, get off my knee, please. I love you, but stay down. So, for example, a court case in Moravia, which is in the Czech Republic, from 1353, which gives some insight into a woman's, control over her own body and her offspring. Little girl, I'm telling you, stop climbing. Don't get on my nerves. I love you, but stay down. Good grief, cat. Sorry. So a court case in Moravia in the Czech Republic from 1353, which gives some insight on a woman's control over her own body and her offspring. So a woman had been arrested for trying to drown her newborn in a river. I'm just making sure my chat got behind there. Yeah, little girl being a pain is what it is. So a woman had been arrested for trying to drown her newborn infant in the river, and she had 24 male jurors. Now, this is where it gets surprising. Surprisingly, they concluded that she was not guilty of infanticide, saying, the woman is not to be punished by any means. And this is so because she bore a baby boy and had her own right to him. Thus, she may kill him and make him perish. For everyone, excuse me. Sorry, I had cereal for the show and sorry about that. That was rude. The woman is not to be punished by any means. This is so because she bore a baby boy and had her own right to him. Thus, she may kill him and make him perish. For everyone is free to do what his or hers, with what is his or hers, that which he or she pleases to do. Now, that surprises me because it's in stating that it's basically saying that a baby is more like a piece of property to do with what you want. And so because you didn't kill it in utero, you gave birth to it, so it is now definitely was a living being. It's yours to choose to do with what you want to do with it. And drowning it in a river does not constitute infanticide. While infanticide was a crime, but abortion being illegal wasn't as widely held as it is tonight. It went on to become. Now, there's a very few cases of women being prosecuted during the Middle Ages for even having an abortion. Like, it wasn't something typically brought into the court for dealing with and doling out punishment for. If anything, it was more seen as the church's realm to give penance to the sinner who had one done. Due in part also to difficulty in finding evidence of a body for a chance at conviction, it wasn't so easy to do. And it was looked at more as up to the church again to give penance on based on their belief. I sure could have even at some point reach excommunication from the church. But it didn't say. It just said that, as the church would decide on what they deserve to get based on their sins. Other methods of medieval contraception used. So in some places, belief even in the use of charms or placing castor seeds in the afterbirth were used, albeit not very effective. Now, here's my question on this one. Where would placing castor seeds in the afterbirth? Now, the afterbirth is delivered after you have a baby. It's what the placental wall the placenta that attaches to the uterus to have a pregnancy proceed and the baby grow within the uterus. So how would putting castor seeds in the afterbirth be a decent form of contraceptive, considering that one has to have a baby in order to have an afterbirth, right? You with me on this one? So it would be kind of like closing the barn door after the cows got out in order to do that, and doing anything with the afterbirth pertaining to being a contraception. It's already kind of a little late to be worrying about that at that point. Now, I'm going to ask this question of my chat first. Have any of you guys heard any old wives' tales, stories, etc., recommendations from friends or family, even in your younger days, perhaps, where you had a close call and you thought you might be pregnant, that somebody recommended to you to try to prevent being pregnant or to stop from getting pregnant? Say you had a whoopsie daisy the night before, like how now we have like the morning after pill or something to take in case you had, oh dear, sorry guys, my tablet just knocked over, sorry about that. You have the morning after pill that one can take now in order to kind of help prevent pregnancy from occurring if you happen to sleep with someone, say, the night before. But what are some like more outlandish things you may have been heard about in your day from your friends or peers that was kind of advising you as a way to not turn up pregnant if you did have sex without contraception back in the day? Or did you hear anything? I'm just curious as to what some of the ones you might have heard come out with. Anybody? When I was thinking about an answer to this for myself, the only thing I could really think of more would be things I got told by people to try to induce labor happening early, if I was tired of being pregnant, whatever. But I wasn't hearing anything concerning like if you had a lapse in judgment the night before. My chat froze. Okay. Take Bayer aspirin. Pull out douching the turkey baster. Okay. Interesting. So what would you do with the turkey baster, Aaron? I'm surprised by the Bayer aspirin. I'm not sure what that would be supposed to accomplish, but I mean, the douching thing I could see. And Marianne, I mean more like if you went ahead and had sex with somebody and you were concerned after the fact because you didn't use birth control at all to prevent pregnancy from happening. Was there any sort of advice somebody might have given you to kind of advise you to stop or prevent from getting pregnant? Was there anything you remember from hearing from your peers or whatever? I mean, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Sandy was a turkey baster to get pregnant with. Just heard horror stories of using coat hangers. Well, that would be for back alley abortions, Tanya. This would be like I said. So if you had a lapse of judgment, you went out to the bars the night before, you hooked up with someone, got drunk, you accidentally slept with somebody without using birth control. Like, was there any advice your friends gave you whilst you waited and worried that you might be pregnant, to wait to find out till your next period started? Was there any advice they gave you to kind of make sure you didn't show up pregnant? But yes, coat hangers were used in back alley abortions and stuff back in the day when it was still quite illegal. So, I'm now paranoid. My chat's freezing again. The girl is supposed to use it to suck out the sperm. Okay. Ginger blood aspirin. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, lots of bleed outs from the coat hanger abortion days. So, some of the recommendations back in the medieval era could include various positions and movements, like a woman hopping or jumping around to urinating afterward, which most women do go to the bathroom when they're done anyway, but just saying, maybe that wasn't as common back then. I don't know, but yeah, I could just see some medieval woman jumping around her village, randomly hopping around the well, and people wondering what she was doing. And often with the result, what often resulted from those various methods were frequent result was unwanted pregnancy. Big surprise, they didn't work. So overall, throughout medieval times, the more dangerous time for a baby was after the birth of it, and even from hiding a pregnancy and then disposing of the baby after delivery. There was a big reference to a write-up I saw from France back in the medieval era that was talking about ways that a young girl could hide a pregnancy with the use of the different garments and the corsets and things that she could wear, that a pregnancy could easily go unnoticed until it was too late to do anything. Hence, she wouldn't be committing the sin of getting an abortion, but then what happened to the baby after that kind of didn't matter. No, it doesn't seem like a baby would be able to develop normally with a corset on. And maybe that was the point. I don't know, but just talked about as far as hiding it. And finally, a well-known idea that everybody seems to associate with the medieval period are the idea of, see, they probably knew what she was doing. I would think so. Quinine. Would that work for that though, Renee? Huh. Use 3 condoms at a time during sex. When the first breaks, you still have other condoms to capture the sperm. It seems like that would be difficult to keep on during sex, though, to have 3 of them on at once. And also, have much less of a feeling during sex if you got 3 layers between you and, the individual you're engaging with. But that's just my speculation. So finally, what is the one idea that we think of as a birth control method from the medieval period that everybody thinks was the most common method of birth control? What's the most often thought about thing? If you guys don't get this, then there's the problem, but Just making sure my chat's not freezing again. My oldest son is the product of a broken condom. Yeah, no, I mean, they can break, and that's why using, a backup method. Condoms are good for preventing the spread of disease, but not foolproof for pregnancy. And people say, oh, well, they got like a 98, 99% efficacy rate. Well, only if they don't break, maybe, but you can't guarantee that they don't break. So having the woman have her own form of birth control is a good idea, I think. And so, many don't, of course. Abstinence, yep. I would say a coin. Mine was from a doctor told me I couldn't get pregnant because of an accident. Wow. So what is, other than abstinence or a coin, what do you think is the most frequently thought of idea that would prevent pregnancy that's thought to be from the medieval ages? Like everyone associates this with the medieval ages. I mean, I didn't think I could get pregnant either. My daughter, I had tried with my ex-husband for 5 years of unprotected sex and nothing. I had one miscarriage and that was it. And then I was with my daughter's father for just under a year, and there she was, surprise. I was thrilled, of course, but I always thought it was my fault because it ran in my family to have issues. So, but nope, wasn't me. But you can have, yes, Chris, chastity belts. Way to marriage. Well, that's not going to prevent pregnancy, though. Even in marriage, you can obviously still get pregnant. Yes, chastity belts. And yeah, and it is known too, as an aside, that some people's DNA and genetics just don't mix. And that's where you have some couples who have, trouble conceiving, even though practicing unprotected sex for eons and ever and ever. And no matter what they do, and they've been tested to show that there's no physical problem with getting pregnant. Sometimes it's just the two people's DNA don't mix, or you may have like an unknown miscarriage where you're pregnant, you don't really know it, it's not that far along to be sure yet you are, and you lose it because your body rejects it because it would have so many things wrong with it because the DNA doesn't mix. So that can be a thing too. So chastity belts. Now, the idea of chastity belts primarily came from religious texts. Texts suggested that they were more often used during the Crusades when the men would leave their wives to fight in wars. Now, if any of you in the group today happen to see the post I made with the reminder post for tonight's show, I did include a drawing of a chastity belt in there. The other picture that I included with the group photo was of a woman, but it was drawn during the medieval times, of like a midwife tending to a woman. And it came up when I searched for birth control methods from the medieval period. So I thought that was interesting to include. But the other one was a drawing of a chastity belt. Now, the first drawing of one when shown was in a book called Belleforts, written in 1405 by a German engineer named Conrad Kaiser. Make sure I didn't freeze again. Yes, I did. Bet those things got rusty. Can't be comfortable in your tender bits. I would think not. So I did, for those who did not see the show reminder photo that I post, Sandy always seems to take a look at it, but most others don't. So I don't know why I do it, I guess out of habit. But every show I do, when I do the show reminder the day of the show, I always include a photo that matches whatever the topic is or has to do with the topic, just FYI. So there is a drawing of an actual chastity belt. Now, I did try to copy the drawing myself last night. It's similar. I will put that out there. I am not an artist when I'm that tired by any means. I suck at even copying at that point. But this was a copy of the drawing that was shown in the group photos. So if you really want to see the actual drawing, that was from that book, you can just go look in the group at the show reminder notice. Seen it. Okay, guess they had to get permission to pee, etc. Well, it would be locked. Yeah, saw the drawing. Okay, so this, for those who didn't see it, is my rendering of said drawing. Lovely, isn't it? So this would be the lock, and yes, this would be, what was that? That was weird. I don't know if that was Katie or not. So this would be leather, but this part here was metal, and it would be locked so she couldn't open it. Now, how they would go to the bathroom with that thing on, I have no idea, but I've never seen any write-up on it from that. But chastity belts, the idea of them came mostly from religious texts, talking about when men would go off to fight wars during the Crusades, that out of fear that their wives, and their insecurities, of course, that their women would be cheating on them, they would jokingly put one on them. Now, the artist who drew that original picture, Conrad Kaiser, he may have meant it. It's used more sarcastically, though, by the tone of his book. I guess his book was written very tongue-in-cheek in the style of book that it was, and so it's kind of thought. There are like a mad ton of versions of the chastity belt out there in museums and so forth on display for people. But it really wasn't until the 16th century that it became more commonplace for depictions and references to chastity belts, and not showing the actual usage of the belts. So, for example, if backtracking towards the beginning of the show, I said how the medieval period ran through the 1500s. So it didn't become commonplace to start seeing depictions of them or references till the 16th century, like really towards the end of the medieval period. And so again, like they're not actually showing the usage of the chastity belts being worn. They are overall seen as a comic reference to the men's fears that their wives would cheat on them with younger men. Little proof does exist that men actually forcibly locked up their women's bodies in these things. It's thought ones seen in museums are forgeries, or at least made much later than depicted to have been made. Okay, my chat keeps freezing tonight. Lord, to have one and have the man get killed while gone. I thought that last night when I was drawing this. I was like, God, what would happen if the guy died on the battlefield and he had the key? If he really had locked this woman up in this thing, like she'd have to go to a locksmith or something to get this thing broken open. Actually stick that up the woman's B card. It would actually go on the front over top of their junk, Aaron, just as an FYI. So it wouldn't, like, it locks on them. So it's a belt that they would wear. Let me get the drawing up again. Okay, so this would go around their waist, Aaron, right? This would come down around like their butt cheeks. And then this is like a metal piece that would go over top of their vaginal opening. So this would sit between her legs, not going up in, but sitting over top of. So kind of like if you think about how cod pieces for men have like the leather piece that covers up the crotch area. It's kind of like that for a woman, except it's not leather. It would be made of metal. I don't know many women who, unless they were held down forcibly by many men, would tolerate one being locked into one if it was shoved up in. So again, it really looked at it as more a comical thing, and talked about sarcastically versus being really like something that was widespreadly used. Men can cheat, but that's always been seen as okay, Marianne, whereas women, are supposed to be chaste and pure. Yeah, kind of like a string bikini. except it would be like a leather belt made out of leather with studs on it holding the different pieces of leather together, but then it would have like the metal centerpiece to go over top of her material. So it's thought that the ones seen in museums are forgeries, or at least made much later than the depicted age is. They weren't actually created really until the 18th or 19th century, which would be like the 17 or 1800s, despite the joke of them from the Middle Ages. So it was really more of a joke back in the Middle Ages, but it really was heading into the 18th and 19th centuries that they were actually something that got made. Now, it's widely held to be more of a myth that they were actually used. So, I'm sure I'm not blocked again. Well, not blocked, but behind. But she could perform oral. Well, sure, because her mouth isn't locked up, her crotch is. So that goes around her waist and it covers her genitalia, but it's not covering her mouth. I mean, you know, it would just prevent her from having intercourse with somebody, basically. So there you have it, folks. Medieval birth control methods in a whole shebang, if you will. So in conclusion, it really, you know, the idea of using birth control has been around since long before now. And, you know, it's not a new idea by any means. Would she want to if she couldn't get any relief herself? Exactly. Exactly, Natalie. Why would she want to perform oral sex with anybody if she couldn't get anything for her pleasure for herself? Although back then women weren't supposed to enjoy sex. It was strictly supposed to be meant to have, you know, allow for procreation. So she wasn't supposed to get any satisfaction from it. So using, you know, any like some of them obviously are way out there, especially about you know, using animal parts and dung and things like that. I wonder how many of those actually killed a woman versus helping her not get pregnant. And it could be quite graphic, but you know, herbal remedies seem to be the most popular way of dealing with it. Either the use of plant material to create a barrier or to help basically cause an early term pregnancy to end, i.e., causing an abortion. But other than that, like there wasn't. It's obviously gotten much more scientifically based nowadays, tested out, and many more methods that are reliable. And you know, if one kind doesn't work for a woman today, there are options to be used. And you know, men, it's still kind of limited what they have available for options for birth control. But so it still really falls on the woman. I'm right about to say that control. It was a sin for her to enjoy a pleasure of sex. So stupid. Yeah, no procreation with oral unless those are Olympic swimmers, right? Yeah, I mean, even like back in Sigmund Freud's days. Now, of course, this is the Victorian era, not the medieval period, but he promoted that even way in as recent times as that, where women were not supposed to enjoy sex. It was strictly for the men because men were thought to not be able to handle going without sex for a certain period of time, or they could get blue ball or explode and whatever. So that women or that men had to get relief, whereas a woman was just solely there to satisfy the guy and, you know, disregard any pleasure for herself. So obviously we know better than that today, thankfully. But yeah, back then, I mean, a woman would still have sex. And not saying that women didn't enjoy it back then. It's just saying that it was more, especially by the church, thought of as just simply to procreate, and that's it. Like one wasn't supposed to enjoy it. It was just meant to pop out the babies. So there you have it. Medieval birth control methods. So the next show, let me find my pen too here. I know we're kind of wrapping up early tonight, but I mean that was 20 pages of notes, and I was kind of running out of different things of angles to cover the same material by, so didn't want to fudge up the material, but that's what there is out there on the topic. Like they said in the research, that a lot has been lost to time. There are some archaeological records still found in ancient texts, but a lot of it's been lost. So, there's only a limited amount left that's known about. Yeah, that's what I was asking, Dad, is I didn't know how a woman would go to the bathroom with that belt on. Like, how do you're locked in, and it seems like it would get pretty nasty by going around it, just letting loose with it on, and you'd have to try to wiggle some space in there to wash inside there. They do sell them, Renee, still, really? Wow. Yeah, I could see it maybe used by submissives and, BDSM practices for those who are into that sort of thing. I'm guessing if they were made of metal, yeah, you'd have to like wash it off each time you went to the bathroom, because otherwise, as far as I can tell, it's like pretty flush up against, the vaginal lips. So it's not like you have a lot of space in there to move it aside or whatever. But yes, I asked that same question. Like father, like daughter. It's kind of funny. Can you imagine if you ever having your menses? Exactly. I'm guessing, like I said, you might be able to wiggle a couple finger space in between you and the belt by wiggling it around or whatever. But, you wouldn't be able to take it off unless you had a way of cutting it off. And even then, how would that look if you came home, your husband was out fighting a war or something, he came home and you would cut your way out of it, the belt meaning, and how would you explain that to them? You know what I mean? If you were they forced you into it, which again, it wasn't really a valid practice. It was more tongue-in-cheek, jokingly, like, oh, we're gonna have to lock her up to keep her from having an affair on me, like insecure men joking around, basically. So I'm guessing they weren't frequently used to have to worry about those things, thankfully, but yeah. That's the only thing I can figure anyway, is that you'd have to be able to get at least a couple fingers space-wise in there in order to clean yourself after going to the bathroom and or having your period, So, topics for next week's show to vote on, we have the Knights Templar, unusual cryptids, creepypasta, which are like horror-related legends, Stonehenge, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the Goat Man, or reptilians. Unless somebody else has something to add to it. So, and if anybody watching on YouTube or on our website, on the Soma Fusion Radio website, if someone has a topic idea that they'd like to have covered, the best way to get me is on Facebook Messenger, and I can be reached at Donna Hawk, 2 separate words, Donna Hawk, and then Who Walks the Land is a run-on word because that's how Facebook made it be. It's actually printed at the bottom of my screen, and then Gorton is my last name. So you can look me up on Messenger, and that's me on there. That's the best way to reach me if you have a topic idea you want to see if I covered it already or not. I don't know where Karen is. That was a surprise because it was her topic. A lot of people do that, though. They they suggest a topic, and then they're not here when it gets done and covered. So again, I'll read the list and I'll start taking votes. We got the Knights Templar, unusual cryptids, creepypasta, which are horror-related legends, Stonehenge, Ed and Lorraine Warren, or the Goat Man, or reptilians, like the alien race of reptilians. So Tanya says cryptids. Sandy says Knights Templar. Annette says the Warrens. Chris says cryptids. It is an interesting topic because there's so many from other countries and stuff that many of us here don't in the United States aren't aware of. Even from South America, there's a mad ton that, you know, there's a very strong belief in them there, and a lot of superstitions related to them there. Okay, Natalie. Creepypasta or the Warrens. Okay. Sandy says cryptids. Renee says the Goat Man. Erin says creepypasta, the Warrens, and cryptids. Gina says Ed and Lorraine Warren. Still, it's weird with my chat tonight. Keeps freezing on me. Marianne says creepypasta or cryptids. Okay. So 1, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think there still might be one or... What's your vote, Dad? If you're still watching. And I'll have to jump out of chat when I'm done in order to text Katie to let her know that we're done early tonight. I wasn't sure how long it would go with comments and stuff. I knew it'd at least be an hour, but beyond that, I wasn't sure. Oh, and on a positive side, while we wait, speak now or forever hold your peace on topic votes. Cell phone is now up and running. They finally sent me the correct SIM card for my phone. So after a total of almost 5 hours spent of telephone time, I got my cell phone turned on again. Craziness. Dad says cryptids. Okay, so looks like Unusual Cryptids is going to be it by 2 votes. So let me circle that. So on Wednesday, we have the Seth Speaks book group on Wednesday the 21st. And then I will be back on my Beyond the Veil page on Facebook on the Friday the 23rd at 8 p.m. Both things are at 8 p.m. I always start at 8 Eastern time. And so on Beyond the Veil pages for readings, I do live. And then back in here next Monday on the 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern time for Unusual Cryptids will be the topic. And we'll delve into other stuff. So you were supposed to talk slower. I did, Stacey. In fact, I kept getting tongue-tied at the beginning of the show and tripping over my own words and sounding like an idiot in my presentation of it. I don't know. I wasn't getting my groove into it right, I guess. So I tried, but I mean, it was still, we're talking the medieval ages. There was only so much known back then, and most of it was more folk medicine related. And some of it was pretty far out there, superstitious stuff of, using parts of mules to stop a pregnancy or to get rid of a pregnancy. Yeah, some of it's pretty weird, especially them German women. I tell you, the German women from the medieval ages had some far out ideas on their beliefs on that stuff. So interesting, but so anyway, guys, good night, Dad. I love you too. That is it on the topic. Oh, excuse me. So I don't know if she'll get it if I message her in Messenger or not, but she might. Let me see. Katie. She said before text her, but some people call Messenger texting, even though it's not the same to me. Okay, so done. There. and here, and here. So bear with me if anybody is still in the Facebook group or not. I will jump back in just a moment. I've got to find my goodness gracious texting app in here. Where are you? Here we go. Still getting used to all of the different what the different icons are on here compared to my old phone. So it's a LG Journey is the phone's name that I got. So okay, done. Okay.
We're good.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm done. All right, guys. You have a wonderful rest of the night. Lots of love to everybody, and I will see you guys next week for Unusual Cryptids. Good night, all. Love you. Thanks for coming.